Hey everybody, and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program RP-0. This is a recap episode of last week's Twitch live stream in which we are continuing our SSTO development. So we moved it over to a sandbox install to avoid going absolutely broke at about $250,000 per test run. We could get in exactly 3 test runs before our entire space program goes completely broke. So this is our first test. We're going to run 2-hour simulations in hopes of verifying this thing for reentry. We've redone a little bit of the wing design and some of the load characteristics. We are also still flying with our 8-ton test weight, but it's very, very fickle in how it performs, and our first test flights shown here, we arced just way, way, way too high, and we're just a little bit shy on hitting orbit. I blame being incredibly distracted with a very lively chat. But while we were able to come very, very close to hitting orbit, not quite, but we decided that since we are doing reentry testing that we would just go ahead and go for a high ballistic reentry. This was an attempt to make a burn at our apogee to reduce some of that ballistic effect into something reasonable, but we need to preserve a good portion of our fuel as used by the AJ-10s for our RCS system, which is going to be entirely responsible for keeping us stable during atmospheric entry. There's a couple of characteristics, as you can see here. A lot of our yaw and probably some of our weight balance is very, very off. And in this case, with our ballistic angle, the interstage fairing overheated and exploded, which is very interesting because it could be completely shielded. In an effort to correct some of the wobbliness incurred by a weak joint at the Saturn instrument core, we will move it inside the fairing and kind of take the weight-bearing stress off of all of it. And then that, of course, meant resizing the cargo bay door and refitting it, and of course getting it onto this hinge, which is a little bit less than successful right off the bat. We ended up having to just move the hinge down, then attach the door, then move the hinge, position the door, reposition the hinge, and then finally we can get a cargo bay door that works. Once again, resizing that cargo bay is just not a whole lot of fun. We'll also try to add some struts here on the inside of that fairing, trying to reduce some of that wiggle that we are seeing on the way to orbit. It hasn't proved fatal yet, but it is just really irritating. And I don't know, maybe if it doesn't wiggle as much, we will not have near as many problems with trying to go for reentry. So on our second liftoff, we are clean up and away, as per usual, and this time we're going to try to lean into it just a little bit sooner and see if we can't actually hit orbit. This thing has achieved orbital speeds exactly once in all of its testing, but the fact that we know it can do it once means we know we can do it again. But once again, way too high on our arc, so too much of our available delta V was spent going up, and not near enough was spent going sideways. So it looks like we will be falling quite short of orbit on this pass also. I think I did worse this pass than I did even on the first one. So once again, we'll just be trying for a high ballistic trajectory reentry, which typically is a lot harsher on the vehicle than a reentry with a much higher periapsis, I guess. You sink into the thicker parts of the atmosphere a lot faster. And this time, instead of just blowing up outright, we try to use atmospheric autopilot with disastrous effects. So we actually blew up a bunch of things before the fairing went and took the rest of the spacecraft with it. But I think we do have a balance issue since we have redone some of the wing design. So basically we're going to adjust the wing panels that are in the cargo bay that kind of make up the floor of that cargo bay, defining our useful area, as well as shifting the wings down and out a little bit, try to get them a little more in line with some stability. But checking the FAR reports, they're kind of bad. But at high speed, high altitude, we should be okay. It's just when you get a little lower, yeah, a lot more red things start to show up, and I don't know how much atmospheric autopilot can actually compensate for these things, interestingly enough. So we're just going to try to dump some fuel out of it and take another look at FAR. Eventually anyway. But really, we're going to get it out on the launch pad after we see what FAR has to say, and let the fuel pumps do the fueling. Now, this is a much more accurate representation of what the FAR numbers will be, since it will be re-entering mostly empty, and other than a down velocity and a little bit of yaw, it's almost on point. So we'll just go ahead and get this thing outside. I tried to fill a few fuel tanks before I remembered that clamps have pumps, and so if we just sit here and let it fuel, we'll be fine. Up and away and off the pad, and fingers crossed for hitting orbit on this run. We'll start leading into our gravity turn a whole lot sooner than normal, and try to get some lift characteristics off these wings in hopes that they will be pushing us up while we are pushing ourselves sideways, and we don't need to dedicate near as much fuel into altitude as I initially thought we would. But this burn was actually looking pretty good, so we'll just dial back the time warp a little bit, and well, I'll turn you over to old me for what happens next. KSP just crashed. Theos, what have you done? How incredibly predictable. Well, we'll get the game reloaded, get back to the VAB, and just make a quick double check of all of our systems. It seemed like that flight was going to go pretty well, but I do think we need a little bit more authority for our reentry, so we'll add a couple of RCS thrusters, get it out on the launch pad, and start to let the thing fuel quite a bit. Yeah, we'll just turn on a few more pumps here, just to see if we can't get this into the air a little bit sooner. It gave me a good bit of time to interact with chat, which was always fun. Alright, and there we are, fully fueled. Engines lit, and smash. I think we had an engine failure there. I just never actually checked. Our thrust-to-weight ratio should have been more than enough to get us off the pad, seeing as how we made no actual changes. But just to be on the safe side, we'll copy in another RS-25, bringing our count up to 14, I believe. Get this thing flipped, pointed skyward, and then jump outside for another test run. There we go, and now it's just time to let the system fuel. Ignition is good, all engines running this time, and we are skyward. And so to avoid the trap of tedium, we'll just increase the speddy uppiness of this, because, well, we did a whole lot of launches. They all pretty much look the same, but I think I did figure out a much better, much more solid approach. Although I think we were still just a little bit under on this one, but every single time it gets just a little bit closer to being actually orbital, which I guess is one of our absolute qualifiers on being a single stage to orbit type vehicle. And we are unable to ditch our cargo because I still have not remembered to put antennas on this thing, but you know, these things happen. So we'll try once again for a re-entry test, but for this time I will turn you over to old me for live commentary during the live stream. What are we burning off now? Oh, are those the struts that are inside the... Yeah. Okay, what? What the hell? Procedural tank was heat... Huh? Okay, that's the struts. interstage fairing conic procedural burned up from overheating. Exploded during. Yeah, it was the fairing bit again. Well, that is. Man, that was certainly anticlimactic. So, back now in the VAB, after a brief discussion on what the utilization percentage means, we will make some adjustments to our fuel tanks, and hopefully that will give us just that couple of extra meters per second of delta V that we might need to actually make this thing orbital once more. So, just a few quick tanks to tweak, and a few misclicks here and there. No big deal, but after a quick check that we think that we have all of our tanks at their appropriate levels, we'll go ahead and start to run this simulation just to get it outside and see if once again we can't actually make this thing an orbital vehicle, and hopefully without that fairing exploding. So let's get this outside. And out of the launch pad, we would have a very quick discussion on how to display the thermal levels through the right-click menu, and then restart the launch because I forgot to let it fuel, or something along those lines, and then pull up our necessary informational windows before we get on with this launch, so that maybe we can get some clear data about what's going on with our interstage fairing during flight. Much cleaner off the pad this time, thanks to the help of that new added engine. But also starting the gravity turn a lot sooner than any of our previous flights, and being a lot more aggressive about it also. I think this is pure speculation, but I think the lift characteristics of the wing, or the fact that we're getting lift from a wing at all, means we can start our gravity turn sooner and be a little bit more aggressive about it, as lift generated by the wings, especially here in low atmosphere, is going to help push us up while the engines are pushing us forward, so that we can dedicate more of our available delta V into going fast instead of gaining altitude, which would be nice. Not that this is in any stretch of the imagination an efficient design or an efficient method by any measure, really. But if it works, it should just print us free money doing low Earth orbit satellite contracts. That's at least the goal, is that if it's 100% reusable, then all we really pay money for is the payload, and everything else is pure profit. I don't know, there isn't any other real reason to have one of these, especially in a career mode where it costs literally millions to do all the R&D and test flying and flight proofing that will take many, many, many flights. But after a short burn and engine cutoffs, we are actually in orbit. We have actually done it. We actually put this thing in an actual orbit. And then I time warped past the apogee, where I was going to make a correction to make us suborbital to test for reentry. Predictably, I tend to do these things a whole lot. But we will get ourselves angled in eventually, and then start the time warping all over again. And we're also going to bring up information on a few of our other fuel tanks so that we can monitor heat and temperature levels across all of those as we prepare to make our reentry pass, or at least a very high braking pass through the top of the atmosphere. And keep our fingers crossed that it's not going to just spin out of control and explode. Alright, and we will also enable our temperature overlay. Now, red is actually normal. As it gets higher in temperature and closer to white is when it is actually overheating. So this will just give us a nice visual representation of how the spacecraft is faring as far as its reentry drag versus anything else is going. So there is our first super high pass. We're now approaching our apogee, and we're going to point straight down our retrograde vector and make a small correction on the OMS engines to put ourselves on a very much suborbital path so that we can make a honest attempt this time, as we are actually at orbital speeds and we can control how low our periapsis is. We're hoping for a nice gentle dip into the Earth's atmosphere and probably several consecutive skips and hopefully no explosions this time. No promises. We'll adjust our angle and heading as high as we can and try to maximize our drag profile, but I am going to turn you over to old me for live commentary. All enabled. Alright. So the closest to white this thing gets, the hotter we're getting. This I would expect. That totally makes sense. We are coming in a lot shallower than we ever have on any of these other attempts, so if this can work, maybe there is hope. Yes, I do have oh! Stupid. We don't have signal, it doesn't matter. I can't ditch my cargo anyway. Yes, I do have Infernal Robotics. Here, protein bar. Good for bones. For Stalin. Okay. Simulation gaming, what am I supposed to be paying attention to? Yes, all 8 tons of cargo is still in the cargo bay. It's gonna throw us off. We did run the FAR numbers with the cargo in the cargo bay. Look at this thing go. It's a little warm. Stop that weird deviation, please, sir. Thank you. You could just hold right about here. That would be great. Yeah, the body is getting very hot. She is sexy. Let's get that hot body. And Die Hard, that is a very, very good point. We could use Infernal Robotics to make some interesting air brakes. And hey, look, we've gotten lower than we did. No, not quite lower, but we're about to lose some engines or something. Nope, those were struts. Those were the struts overheating. That was normal. Those struts are ablative and are supposed to go. Oh, but now we're showing an overheat on an engine. Correct that roll. Correct that yaw. Come on. Come on, sweetie. You listen to your daddy. Come on. Get in there. You can do it. You love your daddy, don't you? Come on. Yes. You keep this angle. Oh, just sit over the prograde vector. Oh, there's an overheat we don't like. I don't know what that is. Alright, I'm going to switch to atmospheric autopilot. Master switch is engaged. And it's nosing us down. Because of course it is. Wow. Okay. You know, if you want a dead spin, that's fine too. I enjoy a good upside down flat spin. As much as the next guy. Come on. Rockets always respond to that, Wookiee. I mean, maybe this rocket does. You just... Oh, come on. Your insistence on being upside down is a little weird. There you go. Nope, almost. Come on. Come on, bring it home. Bring it home. Come on. You can do it. No. No, you're just gonna let air do that to you? All the way over. There you go. That's a good girl. Okay. Uh-oh. And there we go. Yeah, it probably is a balance problem that needs to be corrected, especially at that kind of high speed. Well, back in the VAB, we will take a very quick look at some of our FAR numbers, as well as some of our fuel loads and our center of mass, center of lift, and see if we can't figure out exactly why this thing has become so unbalanced. It's probably because I tinkered with the fuel and the fuel levels, and as well as moved a bunch of other things around, so it's no surprise that something this delicate is going to fall way out of balance. You can see there our center of mass and our center of lift are right on top of each other, and that is exactly not what we want. So we're going to end up shifting the wing surfaces back quite a bit, which of course means dropping them down, because that tank is, I don't know, not the same. But anyway, we'll pull out our FAR window and run some sweep analysis after we get the clamps out of the way. Of course, it's still just not looking great. So we'll try to slide these forward just a bit and see if we can't get a little bit better of a number. Now this looks a little bit better. They're a lot closer together. They're not on top of each other, but that should be aerodynamically stable. Should be aerodynamically stable, but unfortunately we are entirely out of time, so we will not get a proof of test flight this time, but we will be doing that in next week's live stream for certain. So that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. Thank you so much for hanging out. I really do appreciate it, and I will see all of you in the next one. So until then, see you later.